Hello React Native developers, what is going on? This episode is going to be very funky. We're going to go heavy on using the React hooks and the new transition API from Reanimated to build an iconic user experience with arguably only a few lines of code. So welcome to Can It Be Done in React Native? This week we flick through our tabs. Hello guys, I hope you are well. William here recording from beautiful Zurich, Switzerland. Great to be with you. In this week's episode, we are looking at the Safari tabs. So we can push this button to open tabs. We can scroll through our tabs. We can swipe a tab left or right to close it. And we can tap again to select a tab or go back to overview. This example has a lot of excitement value because it's really a very impressive effect and user experience. The only way Apple knows how to do it, and they're always at the forefront of such user experiences. I think everyone was very impressed when it was first released on the Safari iOS app. And when I decided to tackle this example, I got really excited because I knew that this would be a great candidate for the new transition API in React Native Reanimated. So in a typical Can It Be Done React Native episode, we are using the gesture handler and animation values, and we are treating animation values as continuous values. So we move things around like the maybe Tinder swiping card, and we have like some snap points and so on. Here, if I just play around with this example, I'm just pushing. So I have a state here. I'm pushing a button. I have another state, and it's just about defining the animation from state 1 to state 2, which is exactly what the transition API is going to allow us to do. So I'm very excited to get to take this new API for a ride and see what we can do. We used it in the previous example, but there was only like a tiny bit. We did something very trivial. So here we really get to do a full example only based on the transition API. Not entirely based on the transition API because we also have some gestures. You see, I'm scrolling vertically and I can scroll horizontally as well. So and that actually is the third reason I'm excited about, because we can actually put everything together. And really, when we look to build such a user experience, think about the animation values, which the states, which need to be treated as discrete values, and we're going to use a transition API for that. And then we have, like, for instance, the gestures, which are obviously like continuous animation values. So we're going to use a gesture handler and Reanimated to do that. So how would we do this in React Native? We have this view, which has a state, which is the state of the selected tab. So let's say here maybe the selected tab is all. So would be like -1, and then we would have the index of the selected tab. Here would be 0. Here the states would be 1, and here the states, let's say, would be -1. So we have a state to define the open tab. And when the state is at -1, we see that there is a 3D transform on the view. And this 3D transform, we've done it already in a previous episode. So one was the clear example. And this is the 3D transformation that I've taken from my slides from app.js.conf. And, to calculate, we want to fold the view in a certain angle, but also translated on the z-axis. And because there is no translate z primitive in React Native, we need to convert this translate z into a scale transformation. I will link to a video description in the video description, I will link to a video called the 5-minute 3D transformation in React Native that explains exactly the 3D transformation we are going to apply to the views in 5 minutes. So this is the state that when the selected tab is -1, so we -1 is the overview. When we tap on a tab, we cancel the 3D transformation. You just have the regular view. So one thing to know is that we're going to use the transition API from Reanimated to have this smooth transition from one state to the other. So this, we will get it for free. One thing we have to know is that on iOS, the transition API doesn't work on the transform property. On Android, it works very well. So we use the transform property to do this 3D transformation. And the way we're going to fix this on iOS is simply by creating an animation value which are going to follow the transition value. So it gives us access to an animation value which will be always in sync wherever there's a transition. So if you set the same easing, same duration value, you will be able to use an animation value that will be in sync with the transition. And so that's basically, I think there's really two things you need to know. I mean, two problems which I encountered while using the transition API is this: on iOS, you cannot animate, you cannot transition on the transform property. So there is an easy fix for this, which is the one I just described with the animation value. In Redash, which is this library of helper functions for Reanimated, we provide a hook that you can use to synchronize an animation value to a transition. And so that's what we're going to use here for iOS. And the second issue that I found with transition is that a transition view cannot have, as a children, cannot have a gesture handler or a scroll view. So as soon as the transition is made, the identity of the gesture handler is lost, and it's not connected anymore to the animation values. So we need to make sure that, and so this is only on Android. On iOS, that's not a problem. But so we need to make sure that the gesture handler, or the scroll view or whatever, is outside, in terms of the hierarchy, is outside the transitioning view. If not, it's not, after the first transition, all the gestures will be broken. So yeah, I think that's pretty much how we would do this in React Native. But what do you guys think? Can it be done in React Native? Let's have a look. Before we get started, two things. First, if you like the show and you would like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee, and I will give you access to the private GitHub repository where I tinker with all these examples. And I will also make sure to treat your requests in priority. And if you have a new project coming up, I recommend you check out React Native Elements Premium Starter Kit for iOS and Android. It's 80% of what you need when starting a new React Native project, from beautiful UI components to great navigation, boilerplate, static analysis, and so on. You can try it using the Expo client on Android or through TestFlight for iOS. So that's React Native Elements. If you have a new project coming up, I recommend you check it out. All right, guys, let's get started. Here I have a boilerplate project, which you can download in the video description in case you want to follow along with this example. I created this boilerplate using Expo init and the TypeScript template. In app.tsx, I have my lists of open tabs, and I have the tabs components. I have two states. First, the tabs which are open, and I'm putting the tabs into the state because I might swipe left or right to remove a tab. So when we do this, we will update the state. And I have the state where I store what is the open tab. So overview is -1, meaning we get this view that you see on the right side, or we tap on the tab. So if it's here, the state is 1, here the state is 0. So whatever is the index of the tab. And here I have so this black container. I map over the tabs to display the tab component. And you see I have, if I go back to tabs, when I close a tab, I remove it from the state, from the tabs state, and I can select a tab, which also trigger a state change. And I received which tab is selected as property to the tab component. So if we have the overview, so we have this nice, if we're on the overview state, we have this nice descending. So the first one is on the top, and then we have the second one is 150 pixels away from the first one, and so on. We also have the rotate X transformation, which again I didn't explain in this video, but you can find it in another video which is linked in the video description. It's a 5-minute 3D rotation in React Native. I calculate the Z translation using trigonometry and translate Z transformation into a scale transformation. So that gives us this 3D effect here. But of course, if the tab is selected, the position is 0. If a tab is selected, the rotation is 0. So you see if I tap, top is 0, no X rotation. I tap again, I get this nice 3D transformation. And then I have the content component, which is simply a web view that opens that shows the website basically. So using web view, and I just have some styling, you see, like to have the title and the border radius and so on. So guys, here, 3 steps to do. Step 1, we use a transition API, you see, to transition nicely from this state to this one, like it does in the Safari app. And we're going to do this using the transition API. But because on iOS, we also need to transition manually on the transform properties, we are going to use transition from redash to have an animation value that follows the transition value. So that's step 1. We're going to do the transition from this state to this state. Step 2, we're going to add some pan gesture handler to do the scrolling vertically. And so for instance, here I have the Google tab, like, so I need to be able to scroll through the tabs. And step 3 is that we're gonna add a swipe left and right to close the tab and use this function here, which we defined as close tab. So 3 steps, let's go. So step 1, transition from this state to that state. And so what am I think I'm gonna import the transitioning API from Reanimated. I think, is it only with one N? Yes. So I'm gonna declare a transitioning view. Or actually, I'm gonna put it here because of, and I need to set a ref and a transition. So the ref, I'm gonna use ref, and default value is gonna be null. And the type is transitioning view. Yeah. And the transition, and I think it's called transition from Reanimated. And it's a transition change. We want to animate on the change. Duration, let's say, I don't know, 400 milliseconds. Interpolation is in out. Okay. Oops. So let's have a look here if we have a transition already. No, because we need to when we select a tab, we need to invoke animate next. That's why we set the reference. So if ref.current animate next transition. Yes. And I guess I can already pull it here as well. So let's have a look. So you see here, it animates nicely, but it looks strange because I think on Android it will look perfect already, but it looks strange here. So let me just save this one, because what we have here in transform, so rotate and scale, is not animated on iOS. So let's create an animation value to do the animation. So we're going to call it transition val. Transition value is use transition from redash. So first argument is the state. So here our state is selected tab. The source is if the tab equals at the selected tab equals overview. So we want the animation value, so source and destination, we want the animation value to go from 0 to 1. 1, so 0 if the animation tab is not, if an animation tab is selected, 1 if we go to the overview. So destination is selected tab is not equal overview. And I think, so I need to import these guys from animated. And I need to pass this value as parameter to the tab component. And so let me add it here. Transition is an animated node of number. I need to import animated. Okay, that's good. I get it here. And here. So instead of doing pi divided by 6 or 0, we're going to transition from one to the other. And I'm going to use interpolation. I have, because we go from only 0 to 1, I have a convenience function which is called binary interpolation. So b interpolate on transition, and we go from 0 to pi divided by 6 minus pi divided by 6. And now this one becomes an animation value. So here, this expression we need to rewrite using the reanimating operators. So let's do that. I'm gonna need multiply, oops, and scene and ABS from animated. So I need to rewrite this guy here. So we multiply h by scene ABS of rotate x. So again, if you're not sure why am I using these formulas, it's explained in the 5-minute 3D animation video. So up here, because now z become an animation value, we also need to rewrite this expression. So we have a divide and a subtraction. And here we can remove this part because again it's an animation value now. So we need to import divide and sub. Let's have a look. Things should work now. And of course we need to use animated view here. So that looks good, but we have it backward, so it needs to be, we go from 2 0. All right, looks good here. I can tap, now it animates nicely. So that's step 1, we are done. Now let's do step 2, and we're gonna add a gesture handler to scroll through, to scroll vertically. And here on Android, it's very important. So we have the transition view. It's very important that we put the gesture handler outside the transitioning view. If not, it's not gonna work on Android after the first transition because of an issue I mentioned previously in the video. But that's fine, I think. We're gonna maybe wrap. Do I need to, I mean, we can put the gesture handler here. I was just thinking probably we need to wrap an animated view in between because gesture handler needs an animated value, an animated view, sorry, as the first children. So let's see. Pan gesture handler. And yes, let's wrap, because anyways we need actually an animated view in between, because that's where we're gonna do the translation when we scroll. Oh yeah, so this view we can also add an absolute fill, or just maybe a flex one actually. And we are gonna add some translate X for the scrolling, which we need to define. So translate X, and here we need to set up the gesture event function. So just gonna use also redash. Here we're gonna create, we need a bunch of animation values to deal with the gesture, because we use use state. We need to use memo in order to only create the animation values when necessary. When we select a tab, we delete a tab. We don't want the animation values to be recreated, because then it's gonna essentially crash our user or app. So let's use memo, and we need, so we know that we need two values, translate X and the gesture handler. Let's call it gesture handler. We're gonna use memo. And so so it's a callback argument. So we need to create, so we have so we can return an object with gesture handler is on gesture event from redash. We need to give it a state, translation X, velocity X, because we're gonna add, so we need to do two things with our translation X value. We need to preserve the offset, so when we finished the gesture we need to remember where we're at, and we want, in a decay we want to add in a scrolling we want to add some decay, right? So when I push, and that's why we need the velocity. It needs to continue scrolling a little bit depending on how much velocity I used. So we need the gesture state as well, velocity. Let me create these animation values. So we have translation x is a new value, velocity x, state I probably need to import value here, and I need to set the dependencies argument. Perfect. State from gesture handler, and we so translate x is decay. So from decay from redash, which will deal also with the preserve offset that we need to do. So let me see what are the, how can I see the parameters, but I guess it's translate, one is translation x, the second one is the gesture state, third one is velocity. Up. I have state twice. Let's have a look. All right, so I got it wrong. I'm sliding in the wrong place. So it's y, translate y. Sorry about that, guys. It's a heat wave. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Up, up. Let's have a look. So now we can nicely scroll, but we already, when sliding horizontally, we saw the problem, but that's, I mean, yeah. Oh, so here there's, okay, there's a couple of problems. We need to add some limits to the scrolling here, right? It needs to stop from 0 to some value here, which is dependent on the number of tabs. And we also need here, if I scroll, to set the offset to 0 and like nicely transition actually to translation y 0. So we are going to use here, first of all, adding some limits using diff clamp, and we go from 0 to minus tab, so tab length, how many tabs we have, times, let's say, so we know we have 150, right, per 150 pixels. Let's try that. We can change it later. We need to import diff clamp, and we know that this value also needs to change to do an interpolation when we, so let me just create an intermediate value. Let's call it, let's say, translate y1, which is going to be this diff clamp. And here we need to interpolate. So on the transition value, which is called transition value, if a tab is selected, we go to 0, or we use translate y1. Let's have a look. Let's see. Okay, so here you see I'm trying to scroll up. I have like some limit, and I think I got it reversed again, like for the tab. Let's have a look. No. So here I go to 0, but so here, I mean, this one is negative, so I think, I'm not sure if it changes something, but I have it reversed here, I guess. And yeah, Okay, let's have a look. So I can scroll, I can tap. Looks pretty good. So now we need to do the third step, which is going to be to swipe left and right. So I'm going to add a gesture handler in content. So let me just add the pan gesture handler here. So this becomes an animated view, which I'm going to need to import. So pan gesture handler, we need to import animated. From reanimated, and we're gonna need to create the animation values. So and the event handler. Again, here we're gonna use memo. So gesture handler equals use memo. We return an object. We're going to use the onGesture handler function from redash that does the boilerplate for us. So we have translation x, velocity as well, because we're going to use it for the snapping, and the gesture state, which I need to create here. So I'm going to need some value from reanimated. So I need to create translation x, velocity x, and the gesture state. I need to add the dependency parameter here and import this guy from redash, or it's on gesture event state. We import from gesture handler animated, and we need to, of course, translate this guy here. So I'm gonna need to add translate x, which we are gonna return here, and translate x. We are gonna spring, again, it's a function from redash, but I think I have it here actually. So what are the parameters? So first parameter is the translation x value. Second value is the state. And the third value is the snap point, and we're gonna use snap point from redash. So snap point from redash is a function that, given an array of values or animated values, animation value and a velocity is going to compute to which snap point it needs to translate. So here value is translation x, velocity x, and the snap points, we have them here. So we go from one extremity or the other extremity. So yeah, let's have a look. So here it's not sliding, I think. Yes, it's translate x here. Actually, this one is a transform. Let's have a look. Hopefully it works this time. So I can move it. It's gonna snap back into position. Let me go right or left. That's good. But now when we hit a snap point, we need to invoke the close tab function, which we have here. So I'm gonna use use code for that, which is a hook from reanimated. So I can put it here. And so I'm gonna use code. The dependency is gonna be on the close tab function, but I think I'm gonna actually remove it on purpose. So our condition is when the translate x, so when is close to, we use approximate. Approximate is a very useful function from Redash, especially when we look at animation values which are springing, because we want to, sometimes they're not going to go back to 0 exactly, so they're going to stop a little bit before and we're going to have some decimal values. So using approximate enables us to remove these small decimal values. I find it to be extremely useful when looking at animation values which are sprung. So if translate x approximate, or if the absolute value, because it's either minus extremity or extremity, so if the absolute value of translate x approximates extremity, then we need to go back to the JavaScript space and invoke close tab. So I need to import a couple of functions here. Condition, absolute, what else? Call. I have some parentheses problem here. Oops. Close tab is not defined. We get it here from the props, right? Okay. So let's have a look. So I can slide, it slides back. I can delete, it transition nicely. Okay, I think here I know what happened is that I need to add really actually the dependency to close tab, because, but I need to check of course, but because if I go to tabs, I think you see I create a new function every time. So let me try again. Nice transition. Here we can, you see maybe you think it's waiting too much before sliding up. For this we just need to configure the spring animation. Let me try this one. Yes, I would say I would just boom, nice transitions. I would just here configure the spring animation to finish earlier. But I think that's it. So these were our first steps. We set, you see, first we were able to build the user experience without any animations using states. Then so already it was kind of working, but of course it didn't look very nice. Then we add some transitions, so it looks very nice. On iOS, if you use transform, you need to use an animation value because you cannot transition on it. That's what we did using use transition from Redash. Step 2 was to add the scrolling value, so a simple gesture handler. We had some decay, we had some limit using div clamp, which is like, I guess, pretty typical things you do when you have some sort of a scroll gesture that you create. And the first step was to add the swipe left and right gesture handler. Again, here really a pretty standard gesture handler function. We use helper functions from redash to deal with the spring, to deal with the boilerplate, to create the gesture handler, selecting the snap points. And so unfortunately, there is a bug on Android with the transition API again. So here we made sure that the pan gesture handler is outside the transitioning view. This pan gesture handler is inside the transitioning view, and I need to think about it, but I think that here there's nothing we can do about it. So after the first transition, this won't work on Android. I think one way we can fix it is maybe by adding like a closing button on you see on the title, and then you would tap on the button to close the tab. I mean, I need to follow up on this issue. Maybe I will provide it also, this example, as an example of issue between transition API and gesture handler. If you know, also have some ideas about this problem, you can let me know. I hope you enjoyed this example. I'm looking forward to talk to you guys soon, and in the meantime, happy hacking.